Welcome to Studio Shrinkage's podcast, and yes, for the first time ever, we're doing video. I'm not sure you're going to want to see our faces,
Yeah,
but
nobody wants to see us.
No.
Nobody cares
What is
about
this?
us.
This is like it's
39,
30,
40?
well, it seems like that, but it's not really. It's 35,
Oh, sorry.
but it feels like 55. So we're going to bring a guest in, and Will, why don't you introduce him?
This is a friend of mine, Henry. I've known him since grade school.
I'm sorry, Henry.
I think he picked up the guitar a little bit before I did in the early 90s. He got real good at it. It probably is way better than I'll ever be at guitar. So, had a couple bands here and there, but wants to record and has been asking me some questions. So I figured, well,
Cool.
why not use this platform to help maybe answer questions people in our audience might have that don't have an opportunity to give us those questions, because they're real common questions, the same questions I think a lot of people just getting started out. He wants to record it in his home, doesn't want to spend $1 million, but wants to get some good quality stuff, and it's real stuff, like same questions everybody else has.
Well,
So that's why
fortunately,
we
you can
got
do
him
so
here.
much more today than you could before with money. It's you don't have to spend a lot of money on this gear anymore. It's the quality of what I would consider the entry level things like audio interfaces and stuff they're so pristine and they're so clean. I mean, I would say there's not a lot of the difference between a low end and a mid range and even a high end audio interface has much more to do with maybe the kind of specialized sound that maybe some kind of like an SSL might have versus a Neve or something. But most of the entry level audio interfaces are now very pristine, very clean, very uncolored. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's somewhat sometimes too natural or neutral, but
Yeah.
that's kind of why you have the box or the computer. All the sound effects and
for sure.
compression and EQ can be done in the box, but there's two different trains of thought. Some people rather have the outboard gear, and some people rather do it inside the computer. So to each his own.
So we thought what we'd do here is, in helping Henry, that maybe we'd help each other, but that's a separate issue. That we might help other people in their entry into this. So Henry, why don't you tell me where you're at as far as what you've done so far and what your goals are, that kind of stuff.
So I used to have like an M-Box, maybe like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It was Firewire 2, and I recorded a little demo of my song. So I've done it once, like a full thing once, and it was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I had a week to do it. We tracked, and then I mixed it all in 1 week, but whatever. So I want to redo it just because I haven't ever had like a nice clean version.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked up a Scarlett 4i4, and we're going to try again.
Yeah, it's a good box, actually.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's a good
I
box.
use the Focusrite 18i20, probably overkill. I should send you my 18i20 and you send me your 4i4, because I really only need one or two inputs. But it's been solid
Thunderbolt
for
3?
everyday use. No, it doesn't. It has USB 2.
So you're
It's the
using a
first gen.
Mac?
Yeah, I just got a Mac Mini, the M1, and
Oh, is it flying?
yeah, I guess I haven't done any labor-intensive stuff yet. So that was my problem when I recorded the first time, 10 years ago, whatever. First there was latency. That was terrible, right? Like
Yeah.
to deal with latency was terrible. And then I could only put on like one or two plugins before my system would crash every time. So I printed everything as I was working, and then added another plugin, printed it, and added. And so it was like hell. But so I didn't get to learn everything properly, I guess, because it was just like I was just playing with something, and then if I thought it sounded good, I would print it and move on or whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to sort it all out in my head.
Sure.
Like
What's your
That's all.
DAW of choice?
I was using Pro Tools before, but Will talked me into Logic, so we're on Logic.
Yeah.
It's all kind of all the same to me.
Well, they
Like
are
the
all the
faders.
same. they ultimately they end up doing the
I mean,
same thing. Sure.
Yeah.
But if you're a
Every
Mac
DAW
user,
does the same thing.
sorry, Will, go ahead.
every DAW has the same functionality, just the look and feel of it's going to be different. So
Yeah.
you should have just as much, if not more, power that you did in Pro Tools.
Actually, you'll have more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the M1 chip, right?
Well, it's not just that. It's frankly, I think it's a. I'm going to get yelled at. I think it's a better tool. I do. I really think Logic is. If you have a Mac, there isn't another tool to choose. It's just. I have all of them, and I don't touch anything but Logic, unless somebody sends me something that I have to work in. Other than that,
Gotcha.
if I'm doing someone who's got PCs, will kind of use Studio One. But I gotta. Will, when's the last time you even used Pro Tools?
7 to 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
I stopped using Pro Tools a long time ago.
There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I was in a recording studio 2 or 3 months ago, and that's all they use. But from what I understand, and this is very common, they tracked in Pro Tools and then they mixed in Logic. So a lot of people do that. You'd be surprised. A lot of people do that because I think the mixing tools are better, and I think you can do more with Logic. As far as tracking, a lot of old school analog guys still love Pro Tools, and that's what they'll always use. But I think what happened was the engineer that was recording for the session was an old school. He definitely wasn't old school. He had like a gigantic mane of white hair. It was like, anyway, he was tracking in Pro Tools, and then the guy who actually did the remix was the guitar player, and he was, 35 years younger. So it doesn't surprise me that he would have mixed in Logic. So why don't you start with your first question, and we'll see whether we completely screwed up.
So I'll give you an example. I guess my first question has to do with stereo bus and panning. So let's say I have kick and snare dead center and something on the left and the right. When I bust it out, the channel that it gives me, it starts with both meters, both pans at 0. Am I supposed to turn it, or does it already bust where I put it, the original track? So let's say the hi-hats were on the left or something. When I bust it, the track itself the bus track is at 0, the panning itself. Do I have to, turn it left and right to get it back to where it was, or does it transfer like that? Does that make sense?
Is it a mono track?
Yeah, that was my first question.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so if it's a mono track, is it centered in the field?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's say the kick was centered and the snare was centered, and I had the hi-hat 15 to the left.
Right.
When I bust the whole thing out, bust all of that into one track, one stereo track, where would that hi-hat sit if my, because it starts off at 0 when I open the new track.
Okay, so first of all, the term bus is probably, that's why I'm getting confused. The term
maybe
bus,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's really not bus. It's just more of the bus really isn't relevant. It's about if you set the hi-hat at 15 left, that's where it's going to sit in the stereo field, in the mix.
Period.
Mm-hmm. Now, you can automate all that. You can change that if you want to float it or move it or whatever you want to do, and automation is a whole other subject. But you can instead of doing everything live, you can in fact you can mix one item at a time if you want when you go back to remix stuff, and you can move things around the field if you want. But
let me jump in. I think I got a other question that might help. Are you talking about making a bus for effects for just the drums?
Yeah, if I set the whole thing up and made a stereo bus of the drums,
Okay.
That's okay. Yes.
It's the same thing though.
Over, yeah, same process. It'll still carry whatever you pan at the main track will carry over to any bus, stereo bus or master bus. It'll continue all the way through the path.
So I don't have to move those faders. And if I did move those faders, it because it messes with it. But I wasn't sure if I was what I was doing. If it was supposed to be all the way
ultimately,
out.
But if you've already done that say you have 10 or 8 tracks of drums, you already panned them, there's no need to use the pan. It's just there unless if you had say a bunch of guitars and you wanted to pan that group or that bus, you can then pan it, but it's not, it'd be double work. It'd be redundant. So you won't have to do it twice.
So leave it at 0.
The master or the bus, yeah.
Yeah, the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. That's what I did, but I wasn't sure. Sometimes I played with it, but I wasn't, and I knew it moved, but I wasn't sure where it was going or how well it was affecting. Again, I couldn't A/B things because and I haven't been able to load up a session like that again, but I will soon, and we'll see what happens.
Cool.
So another thing that I'm trying to understand is mid-side. What is that? Is that like side chaining itself? I don't know if they're different. Are they the same? What is it?
Marty?
No, Will.
Okay. Well, side chaining is taking the sound of something to control something else.
Yeah.
For example, a snare to turn on a gate, open and close some kind of processor. You can use it to probably automate things. If I remember correctly, you want a pan when a certain type of sound kicks in is what side chaining is. It's just coming off this. I guess in the old days when there's hardware, there was probably something came out the side of a box to send it to signal something else. But in software, it's all it's different. It's all not automation, but processing. But it's usually using compression, I think, the most. As far as mid side, I'm not entirely certain the difference between the two.
No, but you're right, Will. It's exactly. I mean, basically what it is a technique that allows a signal from one track to exert some kind of control over the signal in another. I mean, that's what side chaining is.
Yeah. And like I said, most of the times I think I've seen it used only in compression. So you say, oh, when the kick hits here, it's going to pump up the snare just to fix things, and it's not widely used. So I think that's more of an advanced technique that you would probably not really use a lot. I think you would, I would put that on the back burner for now.
I don't know if he's asking about side chaining. He must. He's already going down the path.
No, I mean, there's everything you can learn. Use it. There's no right or wrong. Yeah. There's no right or wrong, but I think it's just an advanced technique that you might not find yourself using a lot.
You can use it in any They all do it. Everybody does it. It's not some weird.
It's
thing.
usually you can side chain other things too, right?
What do you mean by other things?
Not just compression.
Oh yeah, anything.
You can side chain almost anything. Yeah. It's just how you route it to do what. What else could you
side chain, like EQ or something? Like you would.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody use it on the EQ because EQ is more static. It's for something like compression or limiting something or gating
something that's going to change.
Something that's going to open, close, move up and down, things like that. Maybe a modular effect like phase to go left and right, changing your phase.
That's a good example.
But with EQ, there's really no need to go, pull up the bass, pull down the bass. I think that's more, you could use automation for that. I think the whole art of side chaining is just to, I guess, keep the tempo of the drums usually. Like I said, I think I've seen it mostly with compression and drums, kicks and snares, side chain to compressors or limiters to kind of fix things and bring the mix together. So I don't think it wouldn't be used on an EQ. It would just usually be not dynamics, but like compression, limiting, maximizing, things like that.
Someone's got a dog.
Yeah, sorry. She's a cutie too.
Okay.
How about phase? How do I know when something's in or out of phase with each other?
Well,
you'll hear it. It'll sound funny.
That's what I was going to say. God. Why do you...
Okay, go. Sorry.
No, go. I was just going to ask, why are you running into that? Are you running into an issue where you're hearing things out of phase, or are you just wondering what you would do with it?
Both. I don't think I've run into it. If I did, I didn't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't really... When I watch people mix drums and they change the phase and it sounds better, I'm like, yeah, cool, but how did you know it was out of phase to begin with?
Okay, so what happens is everything has a sound wave, And if you say you have two a stereo mic overhead setup, and you have them in a certain way that they're capturing those waves almost identically, they're gonna cancel some sound out. So you're gonna hear
Right.
things
Like you
missing,
lose
like
quality,
high.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, not quality. Like you'll lose total bands of frequencies. All of a sudden, anything over 3K is gone, and it sounds like instead of. So you'll know it's out of phase right away because there's just a lot of sound missing. So when you flip the phase of one of them, that means they're not gonna
Realign.
no, not realign, but they are aligned. Is that the problem? When something's phased, it's aligned together and they're canceling each other out. So when you flip one, they'll be out of phase or fixed.
They'll be opposite, basically.
Opposite, so
yeah.
that you can hear everything again. So the problem with phase is, and it usually happens a lot in drums with stereo overheads, is where I see that a lot. Anything with stereo application, because if you have one mic on a snare, it's a single mono track. There's no stereo phasing, so it's only with stereo tracks. When there's two sound waves they're aligned, they cancel each other out. So you flip one. So I could draw it out for you. I'm doing all these hand gestures, like you can't even see it, but you can.
Well, that's good.
You can hear it because it's going to be missing a lot, and it's usually hi hats and overheads. Cymbals.
You think it'll happen if I put two mics on my CAD, my guitar CAD?
Oh, that absolutely can happen. Some people actually do. Yeah. Actually, some people do it purposely. They'll put one mic here and they'll put one mic upside down to do to catch things back. It's really weird. I've never done that, but
how's it sound?
I don't know.
Well, it's supposed to sound good.
It's supposed to, yeah.
They're just trying to prevent that from happening up front, rather than flipping phase in a mixer or flipping it in the software. They offset the mics right away so that it won't happen at all. That's how some engineers would do it. So it's just a preventative measure.
Because I'm going to use two mics to record my cab, and because I have I have like a stereo rig, and both speakers are next to each other, so it doesn't like do like a wide effect or anything, but it still does like this cool pumping thing that I'd like to capture from a little bit further back than like putting an SM57 on the second speaker.
Sure.
And I know something's going to happen with these.
That is absolutely where that can happen. If you're recording both of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly where that could happen.
Are the speakers, is it 2 amps or is it just two speakers? Two different amps. See, I do the same thing. I run 2 separate amps. But I don't use them out of phase. I mean, I set the point of them is that they're very different sounding amps. One has an open back cabinet, the other one doesn't. One's much beefier than the other one, and the combination for me is what I like to hear. But I
what
run
2
them.
amps are you using, Marty?
I'm using
not
2
Marty,
boogies.
Henry.
Oh, me?
I know what you're using, Henry. What are you using? What 2 amps are you using?
I have a little
an orange.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, okay. The orange, it's 212s, and then a Tiny Terror, and then what's the OR50, or what is the big one?
The big one is a dual terror, so it's 30 watts. Oh. So it's like it's exactly like the first one, but 2 channels.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually only use 1 channel now, and I only use 15. Like, I don't know why I needed such a big amp.
That's because guitar players are insane. That's why.
Yeah.
Just in case you play out, you need more power, but it's good that you have the ability to switch back and forth.
You need less than you used to nowadays with good monitors and stuff. But yeah. I mean, I'm still carrying around huge amps, and it's stupid. So
what I do is it has like an output switch in the back to choose between 2 and 4 tubes, and I keep it on 4, and it sounds still really, really big. I love it. Like, and then I use the smaller amp because my delays and my reverb are stereo, and they come out of the little speaker. Like, that's the only thing that comes out of the little speaker, so it like does this crazy spatial thing. And then like my regular attacks, the drier sound comes out of the big speakers. And anyway, that's why I want to capture both.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to try and spread it, and I want to make sure I don't lose anything, I guess, because of the phase thing. But I'm actually really worried about that because I've never done it, and whatever. We'll see what happens.
The good thing is it's fixable in the software. if you can't fix it before it, it gets into the box, you can fix it on the outside.
Yeah, but I wouldn't worry about it live. I mean, you're concerned about that live?
No.
Yeah.
For the recording.
Okay, just
No,
for
not
recording.
for live.
Yeah. So you're recording that way with both mics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for that, for recording?
Yeah, I have a
So what-
suggestion.
what
I
I-
stopped using amps. I
A lot
did.
of people-
I did.
And a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I'm using a Kemper. I stopped using amps.
You like it?
I swear by them.
I think it makes sense for a studio, like
Yeah.
you
They're
need everything
amazing.
you want. Yeah. I've
Yeah,
seen that,
I
actually.
tried. Oh God.
XFX, is that what it's called?
It's good. But it's very different than the Kemper. The Kemper's is not a simulated. Oh God, the Kemper's sampled.
Oh, I see.
But it's not. It's not like samples like a synth. What it is it samples your amp. And takes readings of the frequencies that it puts out, and basically captures it, and then puts it in its brain, and then emulates what it got out of reading your amp. And the process is a little painful because you should hear it. It's like boom, boom, boom. You think your amp's going to blow up. It does a boom, 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 boom. It makes all these terrible sounds. But when it's done, it has this ability to capture that, and then when you play it back, it's shocking. It's really shocking. I don't think I tried to do this. Is what I tried to do. I tried to get rid of all my amps and just do this live, and just use Kempers. That's it, and that didn't go so well, as it turns out. So because now you're talking about, and this is a whole long subject we probably should get into, but anyway, you start getting into things like FR cabinets, which are powered speakers that are neutral, because you don't want to color the way the amp sounds, because you're already doing that with the Kemper.
Right.
And then you need a power supply or a power amp or a Kemper with a power amp, one of the two. But I didn't like the way it sounded live. I still use tube amps. That's just what I use when I'm playing out. So but for the studio, the Kemper kills. Just kills. I stopped doing amps. It's kind of funny. Will and I have talked about this several times. As a drummer, I spent my 25 years trying to figure out how to mic drums properly. I finally figured it out, and I stopped using them because I got V drums. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing that happened with the Kemper. I stopped. I learned forever to figure out how to really mic an amp well, and then I ended up using a Kemper. So
Yeah.
So anyway.
You know what V drums are, Marty? Henry.
Oh, Henry.
The
okay.
electronic drum.
V drums are.
You know what V drums are?
Yeah, V drums are. They're electronic. There's many manufacturers of electronic drums. V drums are Roland's version of them, and they're pretty amazing. They have mesh heads, so they kind of feel like a regular drum head, they record MIDI events. So they have sounds in them, in the brains, but the best part about it is that you capture the MIDI events in a recording, and that means you can send it to any drum module, any drum sampler, any drum device you want. So you have a
You
real...
mean like the electronic drums that
Yeah.
you can play at Guitar Center?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He spent all his life playing
That's
drums and
interesting.
getting the best drum kit and the best mics, and then he goes,
I did.
I'm just going to play these electronic drums because they sound so good, and they play
I've heard
really
that.
well now.
Yeah.
And you like to record those better?
Yes, but again, like my amps, when I'm playing drums out, I'd never use an electronic set. It's not the same.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I like acoustic instruments
Yeah,
for
yeah.
like real instruments. But
but it's great in the
that's
studio.
interesting.
The other cool thing is that all the stuff is silent.
Yeah,
can play in an
yeah,
apartment.
I think that's right. That's interesting because like we don't know how we're gonna get the drums, and I was gonna program them like to the best of my ability of what he was doing, of his performance. But I'd rather him play,
Sure.
because he wrote it. And he wants to get an electric set because we all live in city-like areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe Maybe I'll talk to
Well,
him
that's
about
not a bad
that.
idea because you can plug them into your Mac, and he can control some of the drum plugins. I know that was one of the questions you had when we were talking last week. Is like, what do I do about drums? And you kept leaning towards like programming them on outside software like FL Studio. And I said, I think
Yeah.
you should stick to the drummer program. I thought you didn't have a drummer. That's why I thought it was just you and your what's her name? I forgot her name.
Liz.
Liz. That's right. I thought you and Liz were the only ones recording. So you do have a drummer, and if he's gonna invest in an electronic drum kit, it's not too hard to throw. You can fold those up and put it in the back of a 2-seater.
How does it connect to the interface? It's just
Well,
TRS cables?
there's a couple ways. It depends on the drum set,
No.
but there's audio outputs. In my case, there's 3 ways. There's a USB interface, and it actually acts, in my particular case, acts as a USB audio device. So it's another audio device in your system. That's number one, which is kind of cool because you can send this data back and forth. The second way, in my case, is it's got a stereo out, which normally you feed into a PA or whatever you're going to use. But there's a third choice in my case, and not all, and I think this is really more of the more expensive ones, have individual direct outs, which allow you to send a snare out, a bass drum out, a hi-hat out, a cymbals out. And that's really cool because the drum sounds are really nice in them. Frankly, I do use them sometimes. But I'll be honest, if you can do MIDI, here's one of the problems with them. They generate so many notes so fast that you need a pretty powerful machine to capture all this data. It's not like a keyboard player is playing ding, ding. It's like, and all this stuff is going on, and it's sending millions of notes. It's sending when it's hit, how hard it's hit, and a million times a second. So all this data is coming down the pipe, and I've had issues from time to time with just flooding a computer with MIDI notes. But if you can do it, it's great because then you can take that MIDI and you can feed it, reroute it, do it, and there's now many drum modules. I'm talking about software drum modules that actually know the brains that you can actually select Roland, BD50, whatever you're using, and it will automatically readjust the MIDI notes to be when you hit a snare, you're hitting a snare. You can reprogram those in the drum sets, but it's a lot easier if the drum module knows it. And it's gotten way better since the days I started doing this.
The nice thing about the MIDI, if you use MIDI and record what drum he's hitting, you can go in the software and say, let me try a bigger kit, a more aggressive kit,
right,
something with more reverb. You could flip the kit in and out because it's just recording the notes or did he hit a snare on a hi-hat? So it just records hi-hat, snare. So you can just kind of like Guitar Rig where you record, you can swap out the sounds infinitely until you press it to, or bounce it to.
Oh, plus you can fix stuff.
Yeah.
In those the V drums, does it give separate tracks too, like for kick and snare?
Well, they're different notes. They're different MIDI notes. So if you're doing it in MIDI, like all instruments, they're a different note, which means you can see it on a timeline, like a piano roll or whatever, depending on what you're using. Some DAWs have drum modes, and it depends on the DAW. But basically, each note is. That's what I was saying. Some drum modules, some smart software will basically say, okay, this is always routed here, but it's actually cymbal when it's supposed to be a snare drum, and that's because the outputs of these drum modules coming from things like V drums and Alesis drums and stuff like that sometimes aren't consistent. So plus people can change them, which makes it even more crazy because I've changed all my stuff. So but what you can do if you have a default setting, like out of the box kind of setting from a drum module, you can bring it in, and some of these drum software sense will basically say what kind of drum module do you have, and you can adjust it. Oh, you have a V drum, TD50, and then it'll automatically, when you hit a snare, it'll be a snare.
That's so cool. I think we'll probably go that route because he wants the set and I don't have any money.
Yeah, if he wants to, if he wants to buy it, it'd be a good addition to this setup.
Yeah, for sure.
Since, like you said, you guys are in apartments in the city. This is kind of what we talk about on our podcast all the time, is how do we make the best of our situations or the small spaces that we can record in, and this is a great example.
Yeah, because that's perfect, because I do not want to sit there and program drums. that's
Yeah.
going to take a long time, and then I have to process them and whatever, still.
Yeah,
like,
and it's not going to be as
I'm
natural as
creating
a
it.
drummer.
Right, of course, and
But I'm
exactly, and
prejudiced
then
because
I
I'm a
will lose in
drummer.
performance. Yeah,
I have a personal opinion about that, but so yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. I mean, they're not cheap, but I have to say that they've come way down in price. I mean, way down. You can still spend $8,000, $10,000 on them, but you can also spend under $1,000, which is unbelievable, and get
Yeah.
some amazing sounding drums. I mean, they have smaller
yeah,
pads.
that's
and
what we're
stuff.
gonna do.
Yeah,
That's what we're gonna
and there's
do.
but there's a bunch of them now. You have a lot of choices under $1,000. So,
Cool.
Yep.
I have one last question.
Sure.
Me and Will were talking about reamping last week, and
Hmm.
from what I understood was, and I had no idea, I thought you can only do guitars, but he told me that we could reamp anything. Like the topic was, if I got a hardware piece of, was that like a pre, and I recorded something, I tracked something without that pre on, that I could reroute it back into the hardware pre and whatever, reprint it. Is that, how do I
I mean,
do that?
technically, I don't think it's called reamping when you do it to like a keyboard. But for example, say you recorded a piano track, so you
Yeah.
have to have two outs that go into your compressor. Well, if it's a stereo compressor, if it's a single compressor, you have to just do one at a time. But you have to take one of your outs and program it on a bus to physically go out of your hardware.
Out of the DAW?
And you'll say,
Okay.
go out of this physical output. And we
Yeah.
could talk about that when the time comes. I don't want to get too much detail, but you have to say, use the, Logic, use this physical output. And then that output goes into your compressor, your EQ, your pre, whatever it is. And then your out of there comes back into, and you have to record a whole new track inside your DAW. So
makes
it's
sense.
possible to reamp. We used to do that all the time just to get some, like, even I remember we would buy these little tiny PreSonus tube pre's for like $100. People would sell them back to the Guitar Center used for $20-$30, and we'd get them for pretty cheap. And I used to have a couple, and then I swapped the tubes out with either the 12AX Russians. I forget which ones were smoother, the Russians or I think it was the 12AX7 Russians, and it would get some really nice, like a little bit warm. It's not too warm because it's just it's a pre-tube, not a tube, but. And I would literally run tracks out of Fruity Loops back in, just to give them a little more beef, a little bit more like oomph.
Yeah,
It would sound a lot better. Yeah, it sounded a lot better, and it was a cheap, $100 preamp. So it's commonly used, and I guess reamping, I think, is the term for guitars, where you record a dry guitar.
But that makes
it's the same.
makes sense
It's
for
just
me.
literally the same concept. You have a dry guitar track, you send it physical out into an amp, back in, record a new track. It's kind of simple. Once you see it, it's like you're like, oh, that's easy. I could do that in my sleep. But same concept. I didn't know if it's called reamping for other instruments.
Yeah, but they're both doable.
Yeah.
So I could do the same thing with my guitar now, right? Like, let's say I track something DI'd in, and I ran it out the back of the Focusrite into. I would just plug it into my input in my guitar. Is that? And then just record again, whatever, with the mic.
Yeah,
or
play with the
whatever it is,
levels to
whatever.
make sure it works right, because that guitar amp is different, because you might need a box in between, because what's coming out of your interface might be a little hotter than a guitar, so you might get some distortion on the input. So when
But the
reamping a
performance will be
guitar,
the
you
same?
need a box. Yeah, same concept, everything's the same. You'll just need a reamping box.
Well, there might be a delay though.
That's true. What Focusrite did you get? You said you have
but we could slide it around.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
There's ways to delay.
Absolutely. I'm just saying there might be a delay because of throughput. So,
But what's your interface connectivity? Regular USB, USB 2, USB 3, Thunderbolt. What'd you get?
Thunderbolt.
oh yeah, I don't think you're gonna have much of
Thunderbolt.
a problem.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, yeah,
I think you'll have close to no latency, so you think you'll be okay.
yeah.
I've been waiting for something like this to come out for so long, because dealing with it the first time was terrible, and going to a big studio is a lot of money, and
Sure.
Yeah, you won't believe what you can do now, man. It's so incredible. Henry, Will told me you have a question about mic pre's, and I happen to have set up. You were talking about doing rack-mounted preamps. Is this true, or is Will just saying false things?
Well, there was
No, it's true.
conversations about the 500 series and what the
Okay.
benefits were, but
Right.
what are you leaning towards, Henry? Is that an option?
I just like the 500 series, like the shape of it. Like, because if I ever build something, I wouldn't get such a big rack, you know? All I would have is the interface and a couple 500 modules and
Right.
and start reamping things, right? Or whatever
That's
the
true.
term is. When the time comes, I would need to learn how to route it. I don't even understand how it gets done.
Well, it's
Like
pretty
go
simple,
into
actually.
DAW or your mic or whatever.
No, it's pretty simple. I mean, that I can tell you right now. It's not very hard. What I have is my audio interface is an Orion 32 plus, which means I got 32 ins and 32 outs. And so if you follow the chain here, the top two is my Kemper, so that's channel 1 and 2, and then this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, blah blah blah. And then in the back of this rack, this API rack here, is a set of inputs and outputs, and it's just chained directly DB25 pin connection to TRS on the other side. That's in the back of the API box itself. Goes right into the audio interface. So whatever you plug into these goes right into channels 3, 4, 5, 6. So when I'm using Logic, in fact, here's Logic, and if you were to pick an input, well, let's do another module here, and let's do another audio interface. So we'll just do an audio. So if you see here, you'll see these are the inputs coming. This is stereo bus. So you can see these are the inputs coming from the modules. If it's a, let me go up here. Let's just do a channel. And if you go here, these are the mono channels. So that's the Neve. That's channel 3. Remember I told you channel 3? So what I did was, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's channel 3. That's the Neve 511 to 517, 2 SSL modules, and they're sequential. Boom, 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 boom. So the way I sequence these is I name them in sequence. So when I'm doing a recording and I have a specific mic plugged in or whatever plugged into a specific input channel, I can actually just select it by name.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's not as wacky as it seems. It's really just one for one. And but the amount of channels you have are completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. What matters more is that if you have a 500 series amp, it plugs directly in using TRS connectivity.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the mic inputs are on the front, but there are also mic inputs on the back. Sometimes, I don't know if you flip back to the rack, but
the rack, yeah, hang on.
the APIs.
Yeah. The way I got
Grace
around
has
that,
input, like the guitar input on the front.
yeah, that's a good
how do you
question,
fix that?
actually, Will. That's a really good question. So the way I got around that is in the back of this API rack. Let me point there. In the back of this API rack is not only do they have these connectors for ins, they also have outs, right? So the ins come from I have a 19-inch, you can't see it because the camera's not there, but there's a 19-inch rack that has channels, that has XLR connections, channels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they go to the back of the API.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I can just plug it in, and I don't care what's in the back of some of these already have mic connections in front, but these don't, and those don't. So the way I solve the
I've
problem.
always wondered that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's how you get
So
around
you basically moved them to the front through like a patch bay or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's cool.
Do you hear a big difference between like the hardware pre's now and the emulations? Like let's say the whatever 512 APIs or.
That's a great question.
I can hear like that it gets a little bit like more alive, but like.
Yeah, let me
Well,
can I tell a quick story?
So good without it.
Can I tell a quick story? Well, I met one of the reps that came from, I think Waves was based out of Israel at one point, and he came, it's somewhere in Europe or
they still are.
Middle East. Okay, so he was one of the engineers, and he sat me down, and he actually gave me like the Bohemian Rhapsody tracked out time. That's pretty cool.
I remember that when I visited you one time, you played it for me. It was fun that night.
so that was when they were first introducing the SSL plugin, and he said SSL gave us the channel strips, actual pieces of the mixer board, and they emulated it so well and took the time to match the audio from the plugin and a real piece of hardware off a vintage mixer, that they did what's called a null test. So it's basically the phase thing we were talking about. So if you put two pieces of audio perfectly aligned and phase them, they're going to cancel each other out. So they did this with two pieces of audio identical, and then they're basically seeing how loud you can get before they break out of phase, and that's how well you could tell the emulation was done. They were able to get 70 dB or 60 dB above zero before they started breaking up the audio. You're never going to get that loud. Zero is clipping, right? So the problem is they sound really good, but what you're going to get out of the physical pre's is a ton more headroom, meaning you can crank the preamp to 10 or 9 and you won't get any clipping. Might be a little loud, but you're not always going to do that. But on a cheap preamp, you can only get to like 2 or 3 on the out of a scale of 1 to 10 before you start clipping, and that's almost useless, because if you have a snare drum, boom, it's going to be quiet and it's going to be clipping. So the hardware pre's are going to give you the value of creating more headroom on your inputs, whereas the emulations are just going to try to sound like the original hardware.
Well, you're limited to what your audio interface is to at that point, right? I mean, the mic pre's in a way really almost bypassed it, because that's where you're getting all your input values. But it depends on your point of view. Like if you look at any of the waves, like channel strips as an example, the emulations, they're really incredible. I mean, I recorded yesterday a female voice, and I used an SSL channel strip, but I was going through 2 channels of the ADL with the tube preamp, and the reason is because I'm using a Townsend Sphere mic to do that. I don't know if you know anything about Sphere mics. Basically, they're emulated mics. They do all these crazy things, and you can reproduce all sorts of. They're actually quite amazing. I sold my whole mic collection because of it. It's really nice. Here's the problem. What you said, can you hear the difference? This is the interesting thing. After 50 some years of playing rock and roll, no, I'm not sure I can anymore. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think I've got the hearing anymore, and this stuff has all gotten so good. So the reason I bring it up is because we were doing a test, and I was having her, who is this lady's much younger than I am, and she's really getting the music in her first time for the most part, and she, I'm sure she has better ears than I do. And as we were going through the emulations of each mic to use, I said, well, what do you think of this? What do you think? So we used a U47, a U87, a C414. And she goes, I really like the U87 old style. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't. Really? Oh, I'm glad you like it. Like I know what I'm talking about. Because I couldn't tell the difference. I'm going to be honest with you. I couldn't tell the difference. So she could, clearly. And I think I guess the bottom line is in the ears of the beholder. So all this stuff's incredible. You can do great stuff, but it doesn't mean necessarily is it worth the money?
Right.
Honestly, Henry, I think after getting everything together and start using it, you will be able to hear the difference. But 95% of the people that are going to listen to your music, they're probably not. Like you could use $100 interface and a $90 mic, and they might not be able to tell the difference.
Nobody cares,
Yeah. I have a lot of pride in what I record. I always want to record the highest quality.
You do,
because as you dither down and dumb it down to MP3 and compress it, you're gonna lose some quality. And I'd rather start with a higher quality up front than start with low quality and then make it even worse.
Yeah, so remember that's the highest value you have there, Will. I mean, that's the recording process is the highest quality you have. The reality is they're going to listen to it as an MP3, which is crap.
On Spotify, on their AirPods, so it doesn't matter. But I think whatever your budget allows, go for it. You know, if your budget doesn't allow you to buy U87, don't worry about it, because it's not what you use, it's how you use it. But still, if you want to, start with the AKG 2414 or 214s, that's way better than starting out with a Marshall or a Behringer mic. And there's no against those mics, but it's still a step up, and it's still going to sound a little better overall, and get you better results, which I think you'll be happier with ultimately. So yes, ultimately you are going to be able to tell the difference between better pre's, better interfaces. Is it worth spending $1,500 on an Apollo? If your budget doesn't allow it, then don't worry about it. Just get the best thing you can afford.
Yeah, if you're going to put money into anything, put it into speakers, put it into, maybe your instruments.
Monitors?
Yeah, that's what I would put it into. Interfaces are they're all decent. I mean, there's very few just pure crappy interfaces anymore. Even the cheapest ones. I heard one that was $125. I couldn't believe how great it sounded. I was like, really? Yeah, it's amazing. So even the low end stuff has gotten much better. It's like everything else in technology, right? I mean, the money flows downhill, right? Eventually, the technology that made the great stuff great a while ago is now available in lower price things, and the great stuff is even greater. So it's all a matter of perspective. And you're right. Ultimately, people are listening to it with AirPods or AirPods. So that's the problem. So, but make it as good as you want to make it. Can. Yeah. So. Well, cool. You probably have a billion ideas of things to do and a billion more questions, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
But my phone's gonna die. That's why.
Yes, that's fine.
It.
Okay.
That's okay. Well,
that's okay.
When you have trouble and we got some time, we'll do a Skype call, just me and you, and we'll take it a little further. I'll show you some sidechain stuff and whatever.
We can do this again too. There's absolutely. So
yeah, let's go.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us and giving us some stuff to talk about.
Well, thank you, man. This was awesome. And thank you for my questions and everything.
No problem. Go charge your phone.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
See you. Bye. Okay, so let's talk about plugins. My plugin is Melodyne. So what Melodyne does is allow you to go in and correct notes, and not just correct them, but repitch them and move them and stretch them and do all sorts of crazy things. And it's from a technological perspective and from a functional perspective, it's 5-star software. It's just, frankly, I don't know any studios that don't use it. It's so incredible. I have a personal opinion of one thing I really don't like much about it, and that is I don't really love the user interface. I think the user interface is awkward. Yeah. It's very strange. Now, I have the studio version, which isn't really cheap, but what the studio version does that no other one does is take individual tracks and treat them as individual tracks on the timeline. So you can basically play with a whole set of sounds all at one time, which you can't do with anything but the studio version, I believe. Is it worth the money? Yeah, I think it's phenomenal if you have a studio. I mean, it's not inexpensive, but functionally, it's an incredible tool, and you can fix a lot of stuff. Now, most people, of course, use this for vocals, but I have to tell you, I was hearing my mix of the song I was working on just yesterday, and I played bass through the whole thing, and I'm so proud of the bass. It sounds so good. And then I heard for the first time after listening to it 16 times, I heard that one note is half a beat too late. And it's really pissing me off. So I'm going to go with Melodyne, and I'm going to move the note back a little bit. And it's a perfect example of not having to go in and re-record the whole thing, because it's never going to sound the same. You have to set everything up exactly the same days later, and all your mic, everything's changed, of course. So it's a terrific tool to do stuff like that. It's kind of like, to me, like I said before, it's kind of like taking audio and doing some of the great things you can do with MIDI notes, except with audio. Mm-hmm. And so it's a fabulous tool. And that's my plugin.
I've seen somebody take piano chords using Melodyne, open it up on the grid, and take each note separately. Say, oh, that one, the pinky was off, whoop, and then move it. That's this is like sorcery, wizardry. This is not science.
It is.
Harry Potter type magic.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible. It's incredible tool. I love it, and
I think its intention was vocal correction, but it turned into so much more.
Oh, so much more.
In the last couple revisions, it is not cheap, though.
No, it's not. Well, you can get into it for 100 and something, but it's, you're at a basic level.
Yeah,
I think the big package is like, well, I'll tell you what it is.
I think if somebody's looking for the auto tune effect, like Cher or T-Pain,
Yeah.
this is not for that. This is for actual pitch correction.
Yeah. So
and fixing sounds.
Essential
And notes.
is $99, and you can edit your vocals and basic pitch and timing, musical stuff like that. Assistant gives you vibrato, phrasing, formants, and dynamics, and that's kind of a big deal. And that's $300. The editor, which is the big system, is $500, and that's where you start getting into. Listen to this stuff. Legendary DNA algorithm, polyphonic audio. So that means basically you can do multiple things at once, multiple tracks. So it's great. It's worth the money. In my opinion, it's worth the money. It's a fabulous tool, and that is my plugin. What is yours?
So my friend of mine, we've been going back and forth about new plugins. He's a really good guy. Studies the art of engineering and mixing and mastering, and he understands, like, from the pros, how to get the sound of his snare and his kick and his vocals and this and mix and that, but he's struggling with his, like, because he does all of it himself. He's like trying to master, which is, I guess, not the best advice. Some people say don't master your own music, but whatever. If you can't, your budget doesn't allow you selling it to a mastering,
right?
So you got to do what you got to do,
right?
So he's had a problem with, like, gluing the mix together, but without losing too much of all the stuff he mixed hours and hours, making each thing sound perfectly. He kind of loses something at the end. And there's a bunch of people out there that say, "Oh, we got this one button thing." They call it, in the rap industry, that some people call it the sauce that you put on at the end or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what the analogy is, but
yeah.
And there's people that say, "Oh yeah, $100, I got this plugin that does it for you." And there's one or two that really are good, and one that's kind of, I think, slept on. It's called, the company's called Data Life, Data Life, DADA Life, and they call it the sausage fattener. It looks almost like a guitar pedal with, like, this goofy cartoon of a sausage from, like, the 50s.
Sausage Factory?
Fattener.
Fattener.
Sausage fattener. And it does some really good stuff to my mix, man. I was like, okay, let's see what this is all about. I don't know if you want to hear it, but I have it routed.
What?
This is with it on. And there's only two settings. There's a fatness knob and a color knob and a little bit of gain. But I started playing with the color, and this is with it on. This is with it off. So it adds a little loudness, but it also kind of pumps it up a little bit.
Can you make the unaffected version louder so that I can compare to both volumes? Because it's much bigger.
Well, this is my mix. This is my final mix.
What I'm yeah.
If I make it louder, I'm just going to put up faders and it's going to start clipping. So this is my final mix that I would bounce down.
I see.
Add the plug-in.
Wow.
It's bigger, brighter.
That's huge.
Punchier.
Yeah.
And again,
well, I get why they're calling it fattener. It's actually, it's the right term.
So add a little color. Here's
right.
Zero color. Add a little fatness.
Wow.
Take away the fatness, add more color. Not as noticeable, but the fatness just kind of brings everything out.
Oh yeah, it's
really
gigantic.
Cool if you're having a hard time with your mixes for hip hop. I don't know if this technically it could work for anything.
Of course.
I think it's kind of lean more towards electronic stuff, but I'm gonna actually try it on some dry drums and see if it'll just bring it to life, or maybe on a drum bus. But anyway, not a bad plugin.
No,
the price is right. You could get it with their Endless Smile plugin for $59, or by itself for $39.
Oh, good.
You can't go wrong. It's
probably
one of the cheaper plugins, but it really does some wonders. So that's my plugin for today.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
I never heard of it either. It's new.
Yeah, me neither. And he kind of put my attention on it, and
cool.
I'm glad.
Very. Yeah, which brings us to gear we would love to own. But, well, we just don't want to spend the money, and we're too poor.
Can't, or yeah, we don't have the money.
So why don't you go first?
So I did it again, Marty, and I found I have a problem.
You got a problem.
I needed to go down Lincoln Avenue. I had to go get some stuff from Polina Meat Market, and 2 blocks away is the store my son always likes going to, Chicago Music Exchange.
Yeah.
And Carl goes, "Hey, look what I got over there. It's not 60,000 like the last one you played, but it's a 1993 version of the D41. I don't know if it's a D42. I have a problem. I really like Martins, and that's gonna when it comes for me to buy a guitar, it's gonna be expensive. This one isn't as bad since it's a 1993, but it's still that's about 30 years old. Pretty good shape. Different. It still has the rosewood, but it's not Brazilian rosewood. It is just, I want to say, Indian rosewood, mahogany neck, back and sides. Still ornate, has the pearls around the the binding with the not pearl, but what is that called? Abalone.
Okay.
But it just sounds amazing. But bigger body, and it sounds so big and so loud. And this is steal for this guitar, $4,295. It's not that bad on the scale of things.
That's not terrible.
Yeah, this is not terrible. So
No.
if I had $4,000 to throw away, I'd probably get this used Martin D41 from 1993. Isn't that vintage by now?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, that's vintage.
Yeah, probably.
Wow. Yeah, 25 years. Right?
Yeah. Well, mine's way more modest.
Than $4,300. That's surprising.
Well, it's half that. So it's funny that we're talking about V drums today, but there's a drum module. It's been out for a while. It's made by Pearl. It's called the Mimic Pro. Yeah, Easy Drummer. This actually basically loads those sounds. So and it's compatible. It's got inputs and outputs just like all normal drum. So you can basically feed pads into it. It's set up for things like V drums and Lisa's drums, except that the drum module itself is basically a little baby computer with a touch screen, and the sounds are actually
powered
plugins.
by Slate. Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. So isn't it interesting? It's got and it sounds phenomenal. So I kind of, ever since it came out, kind of thought it would be a really cool thing to have, but I never did.
That is very cool.
It's
like a BYO DK, build your own drum kit.
It is. Yeah, it is. So it's pretty cool. And that is mine. So it's an easy one. And it's only $2,200, so it's not terrible. And I think that is it for today. We've had a nice, long, beautiful, wonderful podcast today.
That was fun. Yeah. Hopefully, if anybody else out there has any other questions that goes along with the theme of starting out, send it to us if you can. Try to find us on the
we'll
website.
Go to studioshrinkage.com, yeah. Or this will eventually be out on YouTube, and that's the goal here, is to start putting out. In fact, we should talk a little bit about that. This will be transferred to an audio podcast, just like the ones we've been doing. It's number 35, and but the goal is to start recording them video versions of them as well, and we're going to start putting them out that way and see what happens. So we have a Studio Shrinkage YouTube channel, and of course the Studio Shrinkage podcast can be found at all your vendors for podcasts like Apple, etc. So until next week, bye. We get to wave. We get to wave now.
Oh, yeah, we get to actually say bye.
We actually get to say goodbye. Bye-bye, Will.
All right, see ya.
Yep.